Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for logging in to this month's Drilling Deeper webinar from Laos to South America. Tony Manini's lifelong search for gold and copper. Tony, fantastic to have you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here, John. Looking forward to sharing a few of the war stories with the audience.
Good. I'm looking forward to it very much. So yeah, thank you once again. 3 sections, the market prospect section, then hand over to Tony to talk us through his career and what he's learnt along the way about making major discoveries and adding value to the exploration process. And then we've already had some great questions come through. If you do have questions, please pop them in the Q&A section. Importantly, this is not financial advice, so if you get any ideas out of these webinars, please seek professional advice. Without further ado, I'll just pop up a couple of slides and very quickly where the market is looking. This is the last 6 months of the Australian junior resources equities market. And you can see we had a fantastic run from June, up around 30% in the index. And then we had a pretty quick correction back around 10%, and some people were worried that was the end of this big upswing that we've had in 2025 that we've enjoyed. But we're basically almost back to where we got to the high point in early October. So to put that into context, here's the long-term chart of the same index. You can see we've had a big run up. We've had a bit of a pullback. But if you look back to the 2 big run-ups either side of the GFC in 2007 and 2011, you can see that the market got even higher in nominal terms, and also that there were some much more substantial pullbacks along the way to those market highs. I think those pullbacks are probably more like 20% rather than 10%. But then the market kept going again. Obviously, the GFC was a big correction. But we had similar sort of pullbacks in around 2010 before the market took off again. So look, I was just in Europe listening to Rick Rule, and he said, if you're going to be an investor in junior resources, you need to be prepared for significant pullbacks. And I think he might have even mentioned that 50% pullback. So it's definitely not for the faint-hearted, but having a bit of a correction can be quite healthy. And I've heard it compared to running up a hill. You get puffed while you're running up a hill. You need to have a bit of a break, and then you can go again. So hopefully that is what we're seeing in the market at the moment, and I'm optimistic that that's the situation. And just one of the big drivers in the market is obviously the US Fed funds rate. You can see the junior resources index there in yellow, and the negative correlation to the Fed funds rate. I think if you're going to invest in the sector, you do need to take, pretty much in any equities, you do need to take a view on where you think the US Fed is going to go. And I think at the moment, the market is expecting, I think there's an 80% chance of a rate cut at the next Fed meeting, and that is certainly supporting the market and the junior resources market. Just finally, and this sort of touches on one of the questions that has come through prior to the webinar, is the virtuous circle. And I think that's what we're in at the moment, the virtuous circle of share prices rising on the back of metal prices rising, which enables junior companies to raise money to pursue their programs, whether that's a development program or that's an exploration program, which means that these companies have a greater chance of achieving their goal of either making a discovery or moving towards or into development and into production. And then if the market thinks they've got a better chance of doing that, then the market will re-rate them again. And so you get that positive feedback loop. And I think that's what we're seeing at the moment. And for developers in particular, higher metal prices means a double whammy, that their projects that they're closer to achieving value out of actually are more valuable because of higher metal prices. And I think we're in a sweet spot at the moment. If the boom, if you want to call it that, does continue for a reasonable length of time, you will start to see costs escalate. But we haven't seen that biting too hard yet. So we are in a bit of a sweet spot. Okay, I think that's enough from me. I am going to ask Tony to share his screen and tell us his high points and maybe some low points of his fantastic career and some of the learnings about his career in mineral exploration and hitting on some of the wonderful discoveries that he's been involved in.
All right, thanks, John, and thanks everybody for listening in. I'm going to punch through this pretty quickly. It's pretty hard to condense 40 years of non-stop go into a few minutes, but we'll do our best. For me, it's been 40 years. I'm a geologist by background, absolute live and breathe mining, exploration in particular is my great passion, discovery. And so, hopefully you can get some key good takeaways from what we're going to go through today. So I'll cover about 20 countries. I won't cover the 20 countries, but I've worked in about 20 countries over that 40 years. You can see a sort of snapshot of my career here. I initially started with CRA Rio Tinto, and that was predominantly in WA and Laos. Then off the back of the discovery we made in Laos, which we'll talk to soon, I joined up with Owen Hegarty at Oxiana. And then subsequently, we developed the project in Laos and grew the company from there across multiple jurisdictions and made several other discoveries and developments. Then formed an incubated company called Tiger's Realm Group, which went back to my sort of my roots of exploration, discovery, and earlier stage. And from that, we worked across a range of jurisdictions, a range of commodities, and incubated some great companies, which I'll touch on today, many of which have made major discoveries, created billions of dollars of value. Then the last, there's a bit of overlap here, but EMR Capital, so we're a $3 billion private equity fund, which we formed about 13 years ago, where we manage about $3 billion of capital on behalf of mostly US institutional investors and invested in the mining space, predominantly in the operational turnaround end of the spectrum. But there's an important part to that is that where you create a lot of value from these opportunities is through exploration and the drill bit, exploration in the brownfields environment, adding resources, reserves, creating optionality, and fully optimizing assets. So it's an important part of the value equation as well. And then in the last few years, I've also founded and worked with some great younger entrepreneurs to put together some explorers in South America. It's where you go to find the big copper things, and C3 Metals and Andina Copper are two of those, working across Jamaica, Peru, Argentina, Colombia and Chile. And they're very much copper focused, and we'll touch a bit more on those a bit later. So just, I won't go through this in detail, but John, I think it was in your last webinar or maybe the one before, you touched on the Lassonde curve. I've got a couple of versions of the Lassonde curve here. I'm not going to go through detail, but where we're going to talk about today, while I've worked across the full mining value creation of piece of that curve, we're going to concentrate today on really the exploration discovery piece of the equation, which is the first box on the left-hand side. And then where I said you can still create a lot of value around assets in the brownfields environment is the box on the right-hand side. So, they're the two key areas that I've spent my career in. I think my greatest passion is the one on the left, but the one on the right is an area where you can create enormous amount of value by adding mine life and fully optimizing existing mining operations. So the things which, I've been involved with, I've listed here. I'm not going to go through them individually. I might just mention a couple of things. Look, all of these things are a result of work by teams of people, and they're not individual things, but these are things where I've either had a leadership position in them, I've put them together, or been very actively involved in. For example, Prominent Hill, I'll call out Prominent Hill here. Prominent Hill was discovered by Derek Carter and Tony Belperio at Minotaur. I think the key thing, the reason I've put it into greenfields here is because we acquired that, Oxiana acquired that from Minotaur. I think when everybody thought that the upside potential at Prominent Hill was probably about 50 million tonnes, we subsequently, recognised the potential there for it to be hundreds of millions of tonnes. And so that was in a very early stage of that, the evolution of that project. I'm going to talk today about Sepon up in Laos. You can see these are big numbers in terms of value created. The brownfields environment, I've just essentially, put the expansion of resources or mine life just to give you some idea of the scale, and then the companies that I've founded, co-founded, or incubated are down the bottom there, and most of those have created quite a bit of value in market cap. Over the journey. None of these things are simple or easy, and none of these things happen in 5 minutes, and you'll see that as we go through today. And I've already mentioned EMR Capital down the bottom. So that's sort of a summary of the career. Let's punch into the first one of those, which is Sepon in Laos. You see the title there, and you're going to see this thematic through my presentation today. Where I've spent my career really is it's a formula that's used very successfully, I think, by the likes of Robert Friedland or the Lundins and those types of groups who, people see as having been extremely successful. But these are 50, 20, 30, 40, 50 year programs that these groups have been running. And their formula is to go where the big ore bodies are. So just not put jurisdiction in front of everything else. As long as safety and security are reasonable or improving, go into underexplored or overlooked frontiers, find big deposits, and then ultimately, if they're good enough and big enough, you will back solve all the issues. So that's really going to be a bit of a thematic you see around my career and the things that I've done and been involved with. So Sepon was the first of those. We went up into Laos. Laos was just a completely new frontier at that time. I think they get 1.5 million or 2 million visitors a year now in tourism, but I can assure you that when I went there in 1989, there was none of that. This was an area out on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You'll see up there in the top right-hand corner, Ho Chi Minh Trail, out on the border with Vietnam, the most heavily bombed place on Earth. And you can see the top right, they're all bomb craters that you can see around that village's house there. So, and that's back from Vietnam War era. On the bottom there, on the bottom right, you'll see that little stand there that's got spring onions growing in it, and you can see it's built on cluster bomb unit cases. So they've repurposed those cluster bomb units, which were dropped from aircraft, opened up and dropped scatter bombs, and those cases were repurposed by villagers to use for these types of purposes. Now, why were we interested in this? I wasn't the first person to visit this area. I'll point out a couple of the guys who were. So there was Saman Anika and Chris Gregory and Oxide Insieme were the first guys to go up, 2 Lao guys, and one of my colleagues from CRA, Chris Gregory. So this area was in the archives, and you can see this map in the middle here, which is sort of a plan with and it just essentially you've got these 2 river valleys that come up. And both of those have got dotted black lines on it, was where the Soviets during the Russian occupation in Laos had alluvial mining running. So you can see that's over a big area, and there was these quartz stockwork zones that they'd mapped and subvolcanic intrusion. And you look at the caves down the bottom. So this is a big area. So when the guys came up the river, they followed up the Nam Kok River, you see, which is the one right in the middle. They come up past the village called Ban Nong Kadeng, where it makes where my pointer is there now. It crosses one of these subvolcanic stockwork zones. And what they seen in the river was these local people here, local villagers panning for gold in amongst these big, hard silicified boulders on the edge of the river. And I'll just point out here, just for interest, you see the gold pan there that this lady's using. That's aluminium, and that's aluminium probably from a downed aircraft, a downed US aircraft, that they've repurposed those and made gold pans out of them, and they made canoes out of them to come up the river as well. So People were panning in amongst those boulders. The guys rock chipped across those boulders, and I think they got 49 samples, average 5 grams a tonne. So that was a pretty good start. So off the back of that, essentially the company pegged all this ground. It took a couple of years to get the contractor work in place. We went in there then, helicopter supported. You'll see, so the right-hand side is copper on the top, gold on the bottom, in-stream sediments, and you'll see the scale bar there, 20 kilometres. So it's a big area. It's like, 100 kilometres long and 80 kilometres wide, stream setted, all that, and you can see this screaming copper and gold cohesive anomaly in the middle over probably 30 kilometres. So when you see this, I love seeing this. This is, when you see that, you know there's going to be something big in there. That's you're onto something good. So subsequently honed in on that central area, did a systematic grid soil over the top of it, and we found 5 million ounces of gold in the top section, over 5 million ounces of gold. Down the bottom was the copper. The copper came secondary. There's a long story behind that. It was a very remote area, and the company wasn't interested in copper initially. It was really a gold program, and the target we were given was to find 2 million ounces. We quickly found 2 million ounces. They moved the scale bar to 5. We found 5, and then they moved it to 10. That was after CRA merged with Rio Tinto, and the hurdles got higher and higher. As I said, not a lot of interest in the copper. Very remote area, and you would never be able to get it out. But I learned something very important about this. When places open up and support comes for infrastructure, within a short period of time, this went from being an area where it took you 7 days in a Russian Jeep to get there to having a major highway within 40 kilometres of it. So that happened over a period of probably 8 years. So things can open up pretty quickly in frontier areas when they want, when there's enablers. So you'll see there 40 million tonnes of 2.9. That was the first deposit at Kanong, and then we had drill results out at Tenkam. I've pulled this out of an old archive presentation, but ultimately this has ended up being over 100 million tonnes of 2% copper, all open pittable. So very shallow, low strip ratio, open pittable. So just a couple of lessons, for the geologists that are here. You come up the river, you get 49 samples averaging 5 grams a tonne. You think, this is easy, right? So we got in there. We followed those boulders out up out of the river, and here the vegetation's been stripped off. So you can see on the bottom right what the vegetation's pretty heavy vegetation. So that's what it was like previously. But all these big boulders are jasperoid boulders. They're silica replacement of carbonate rocks. We didn't know that at the time. And there's a huge boulder field here. And all these boulders are running, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, 15 grams a tonne. So you think, beauty, we've got this big boulder field. So we got a drill rig and we drilled underneath the first of these, and then we drilled underneath the second of these, and then we went along strike and we drilled 11 holes and drilled 11 duds. And then quickly realised that sitting underneath this, they were all sitting on top of effectively barren rhyodacite porphyry sill. And this, we were sort of baffled by what was going on. Around this time, Dick Sillitoe came, and a lot of the geos on here will know Dick Sillitoe, one of the most famous economic geologists in the world, predominantly around porphyries and epithermal systems. A brilliant geologist, has seen so much so widely. And Dick came up and said, I think this might be a replacement bed and a Carlin-style system. So off the back of that, the team went out and started mapping, and you'll see they did a brilliant job, and I'll get to the team in a second, but you'll see them in the middle there, that little map that's got all these boulders, like these little black dots mapped out where there's contour lines, and you can see they mapped these boulders all to scale. Brilliant work the geos did, and they mapped that out to scale. And it was very clear that the train of boulders were following the contour of the hill, so you knew it was a bed. So we subsequently went back. If you see the bottom right-hand side, you see the boulders when it was cleared. You see the boulders along the edge there. We took the rig back up into the bush behind this, and we drilled down to hit this probably 100 metres or 50, 100 metres down below the surface here, back into the hill. And bingo, we got a beautiful intersection. I think it was 12 metres at 4.3 grams a tonne. So from that point onwards, we knew we had a Carlin-like system, replacement beds. We knew that it was controlled. We didn't really know the structural patterns or anything at that time. But from holes 12 to holes 19, we put together 1 million ounces in those next holes. So the first 11 holes, nothing. Once we got a handle on the geology, nutted it out, it was perplexing at start. In the next 7 holes, we got 1 million ounces. So we knew, yep, we've got a good handle on the geology, and we went from there. And I'll just reiterate, and then we've got a couple of little models, working models here, but you know, the work that was done here was just first-class technical work. We put together the stratigraphy, fantastic mapping. We used, you know, great sedimentologists. We used, you know, terrific. The team just done a terrific job. And here is the team, and you know, there's 2 snapshots here. So the top one's in '95. And I'll just talk to a couple of people. So Chris is the big tall guy on the left-hand side. So Chris was the original guy that came up the drainage with Sepon, who's immediately in front of him. He's got, unfortunately, he's got the purple shirt on there. But Sepon was really the guy who led Chris up there, and I went to Laos this year, early in the year. Went to Sepon's house. It was like family. We had a massive get together, and Sepon is the head of the program, and the mine's been running now for 24 years, I think. And Sepon's the head, and he's still there. So Somchan in the middle here, right in the middle. He's 72 years old, and he's still a project G out the site. And then, look, it was a very multicultural team. We had Aussies. We had really good Lao geos who were Soviet trained, and a group of Filipinos who worked with us. So everyone was very dedicated, very focused, and worked extremely hard. You can see the terrain we were working in up on the top right-hand corner. And then sort of the mode of transport, the old Soviet Mil-8 was the helicopter of choice for transporting fuel drums and supplies out into these remote areas to support our exploration. So, you know, this was very much a transformational discovery. You can see here, just give you a snapshot. We were on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That's what it looked like. You've got the villager there in his Mao green shirt on the road, the original road that we came in on, with a bullock cart with wooden wheels, and that was the road that was there in 2003. So after the mine was built, and then that was what it looked like, probably, you know, early on in terms of terrain, and then once the copper and gold mines were built. And I'll just say that it's been operating for 24 years. It's produced pretty much between 50 and 100,000 tonnes of copper for 24 years, and now producing 200,000 ounces of gold a year continuously. So it's been it's created massive value. Little story here, just very out of interest sake. So Sepon was, the copper deposit at Kenong was one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see in terms of deposits. It was a supergene enriched deposit, incredible numbers. You know, we're getting, 20 and 30 and 40 metres, 20% copper in some of the holes. These are a couple of mineral specimens that came out of there. The story behind this is the one on the right side is actually the native copper sitting in my bookshelf over the back here, but the one on the left-hand side, I had a friend of mine in Denver send this to me this year, and he said, "Oh, look what I've seen in a specimen shop in Nevada, Tony. This is malachite azurite, which are copper minerals, and this is a beautiful specimen of that." And he said, "Have a look closely at the tag." Now, when you look closely at that tag, it says azurite and malachite from the Sepon mine, Villaburi district, Savannakhet, Laos. And this was in a shop in Nevada, in Reno, in a mineral specimen shop. And the price tag is $75,000 US. So I immediately get on the phone and call my wife and say, "Dale, all those boxes of rocks that I had in the basement, can you go and see if they're still there?" Because I had boxes of this stuff. My wife says, "I've been and had a look. there's only about 3 boxes left there. And then I remembered when we renovated our house about 4 or 5 years ago, we moved and we threw out a whole lot of this. So I probably threw $1 million out somewhere. Moving on. So that was a great discovery that we made at CRA Rio. We then, this was Oxiana at the time Sepon was developed. We went down to Cambodia, again, new frontier. John, I know you know this area pretty well. And this is the Okvau mine on the right-hand side. So Okvau was developed by Emerald Resources. It's been one of the lowest cost producers on the ASX over the last few years, about 130,000 ounce a year gold producer. Was discovered by my team, led by Stewie Smith, was the first one who went out there, and some of the other local guys. This is what it looked like on the left. This is artisanal workings. A lot of holes everywhere. People just digging around tree roots, digging across here, and panning for gold. And they were living here. One of the most incredible things I ever seen was they were living in these little tarpaulin-covered huts. And in one of these, there was a bar set up with a pool table. And I just could not for the life of me work out how they got a pool table out there and had a bar set up on these artisanal workings. But they did. And subsequently, we drilled that. We drilled it. We found about 1 million, and I think it was 1.2 million ounces, which was subsequently developed by Emerald. It's probably logical to say that, it was pretty obvious that it was there. I can assure you that there's many of these artisanal workings that look like this in this area of Cambodia, and we drilled many of them, and this was the only one that had something that actually came together as an economic proposition beneath it. All the others had narrow veins and a lot of near-surface enrichment. So just moving on, next one is up in, again, my New Frontier area, Cambodia, New Frontier area. And then we went up into the arcs in Kalimantan with Asiamet. This is at Tiger's Realm. This arc up in the middle of Borneo, the Kalian gold mine was operated here by CRA and Kalimantan Gold. It produced 14 million ounces and was the 500,000 ounce a year producer. Made a poultice of money, some other really big deposits in there. Mamut's a big porphyry copper gold up in the Malaysian part, and really an overlooked world-class copper gold belt that not many people have explored. You can see the sort of terrain here. It's a very, it's a remote area, but you can see down the bottom, there's gold dredges operating the river. So that there's a fair bit there. I think where these kids are in the boat, you can see there's a gold dredge working behind on them as well. What's very interesting about this area, it was discovered by a guy called Mansour Geiger. Mansour's in his 70s, still works for us today at Asiamet. Absolute legend up in this part of the world. If you ask Mansour, why did you go to this area in the first place? He went up this river in a kating, which is that little boat you see in the bottom right hand. He went up this river there, and he basically spent 3 months up here prospecting to make this discovery. And I said, why did you go up there in the first place? He said, because a guy, a very famous yogi type of guy, put his finger on the map there and said, there's going to be lots of gold and diamonds in this area. And that's true story. So when you get up there, again, overlooked areas, world-class terrain. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. The discovery, the team on the right-hand side, you can see the type of, over here, this is this plan here, don't worry about the plan, but it's about 7-8 kilometres across and about 7 kilometres down, and you've got high-grade, lead, zinc, silver, gold right through it. You can see some of the results down the bottom there, just outstanding. You've got all this outcropping. These are VMS systems, absolutely completely new province, unrecognised style of mineralisation in this part of the world. But you can see the drill core there. You don't have to be a geologist to realise that's full of metal. I think the one on the right-hand side's got 78 metres of nearly 5% copper in it. So absolutely outstanding. Asiamet's developed this up. It's taken it through, and we've actually just signed a binding offer for it to be acquired for a bit over $200 million from a Chinese group is acquiring it from us. So it's been a long time in the making, but we got there. So I'm going to shift gears now. I'm going to move across to on uranium for a second, John. This is NexGen Energy, which is a company we incubated in the Tigers Realm group. And I just want to throw this up because I think it's a good lesson about being opportunistic in down parts of the cycle, which you just touched on before. This was, this is an area where it was really about backing the right people at the right time. So I was in a real down cycle. People couldn't raise any money. We backed Lee Courier and Andy Brown and with the first funding to take up, on the right-hand side is this package called Radio. It was immediately next door to some high-grade uranium discoveries, Rough Rider, Midwest there. And it was held by prospectors and never been worked on, immediate long strike from Rough Rider. So we went in there on that basis. We picked that up on that basis, and we supported Andy and Lee and Andy to pick that up on that basis. We went in there and subsequently, we did some work. We didn't have any luck early on, but by being there and by being there at the bottom of the cycle and by being in the game, this package down the left-hand side here, the colours, this is in the southern part of the Athabasca, which was a little bit off the main trend, which you can see heavily pegged on the right-hand side where Rough Rider and Radio are. And then this package came up through Mega Uranium. A deal was done. The reason I raise this is because we at that time, Tigers Realm, had the majority shareholding, and it was very early in the piece, and we essentially did a deal and diluted ourselves by 50% to actually get this ground, because we've seen the potential that was here, where we had high-grade pitch blende boulders at surface down ice from this property called Rook 1. And there was already a very good discovery made by Fission there at the time. So that Rook 1 property was the core focus area. The rest is history. Andy, Lee, they went in there. Andy, they flew airborne geophysics. They drilled the first, I think it was the second hole in the first anomaly, or the first anomaly, and drilled a world-class deposit, which was Arrow. And, that company's now, one of the biggest success stories in uranium worldwide, and it's got a market cap of $8 billion. So, it's a good lesson about taking opportunities in the bottom of the cycle, which we'll, touch on at the end. So another one here, John's familiar with this one. We went down as part of Tigers Realm. We went down to Jamaica. Actually, I met Julian Bartlett was a geologist who worked for BHP. I met him at the PDAC a couple of years in a row. He told me he had this project down in Jamaica. The second year, I said, you better give me a look at it. He showed me it. Then I seen that, BHP had drilled some porphyries down there. Some of them had ore grade intersections, and I seen this plan, and again, the same thematic, multi potassic footprint in terms of the radiometrics, plus prospects, and then a few ore grade intersections. So love these things, very little work done, some ore grade intersections and a big footprint. So we went down there. Just to put that in context, this is the work that's been done. There's a lot of detail on here. And I must say, we sort of got laughed at for a lot of years about being in Jamaica. People thought we were going there to go to the beach, just all about lifestyle and what the hell are you going to do in Jamaica? And they thought it was a joke, actually. And, I heard, people behind your back laughing at you at PDAC. But anyway, it's okay. We were there for a good reason. Look, and this is just where it's evolved to. There's 18 kilometres here of very high tenor copper in soils. The top right-hand corner, this is like 500 to 1,000 ppm. Those purple, sort of magenta colours over a huge area. There's a huge copper footprint here. And you can see Lundin's Filo del Sol, which is up that they've just been taken over for $4 billion and got multi-billion tons of high grade, and it's taken them 20 years up the high Andes to do that. But you can see it fits in there. So again, very huge, very big copper footprint. And I've just been on a call with the guys this morning, and this is coming along really nicely. Look, we went in there. We've been exploring this ourselves for a few years. We've discovered multiple porphyries. We've had ore grade intersections, wide ore grade intersections, and you can see them here. 200-300 meters of 0.4, 0.2, 0.4 copper, 0.2 gold. Really, really nice intersections, higher grades than that. But we've either got grade and not enough tons, or we've got tons and not enough grade. So we've tested the low-hanging fruit ourselves, and Freeport's now farming in here and spending $75 million to earn 75% and doing a systematic program, the whole project with a lot of deep drilling. And we think we're going to find, we're very confident we're going to find some big things in here, but it takes $10 a year for 5 years to do that. And that was something that was just beyond the scope of where we were at the time and our priorities. And so we've done the JV with Freeport. Down the bottom, I just put this up because it's sort of, I guess this is I talked about people laughing at us about being Jamaica, but we were really much the first movers in Jamaica. BHP were there before us, but we were the first movers in recent times, picked up the ground in the middle, Ballast Gate, the Super Block, and then the Hungry Gully. Freeport's now farmed into the Ballast Gate area, and then surrounding us in all that sort of brownish colour is Barrick. So Barrick's moved in here big time, and Freeport. So I've got two majors and our working there. So that's Jamaica. Also in C3, and again, this is part of that sort of same thematic, if you like. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we went down into the Andahuaylas belt in Peru, and this Jasperoidy area was 49 square kilometres. We picked that up out of a private. Consequently, went about building a big package of land here, which we have. You see here, if you look at the map on the right-hand side, starting in the bottom, you've got Antipaquet there, which is Glencore mine, big Glencore copper mine, Constancia, Pampachana in the middle. That's a Hud Bay mine. Las Bambas up on the right-hand side, MNG, where I'm pointing to, one of the world's big copper mines, 400,000 tonnes a year. Hakira, big discovery owned by First Quantum, found by Antares Minerals. So you're in a big district, big copper operations where you find giant deposits. And you wouldn't believe that 5-6 years ago, we went up there and packaged all this up, and there was hardly there. Now, after we packaged all that up, we're surrounded by Rio, BHP, Hud Bay's always been there, picked up more ground, and Barrick, pretty big time into the area. So again, moving into an area with world-class terrain early and picking up a big land position. So up there now, we've already found one skarn deposit. It's about 50 million tonnes of about 0.5% copper and 0.2 gold. We're just drilling this new area now, which is really exciting, called Khaleesi. This has got the right scale, it's really strong technicals, and as I said, we just started drilling it now. But you can see on the left-hand side, this is the analogies we're using. These are the Minmetals, Las Bambas and deposits, Ferrobamba on the right, Chalcobamba on the left. So you can see the scale of the pits there, 1.5 by 1, 1.6 by 1, and you can see the size of our plus 300 ppm copper in soil on the right-hand side. It's 2 kilometres by probably 2 kilometres as well. So really big footprint, copper in soils, fantastic geophysics, mag and IP sitting underneath this. And we're drilling this at the moment. We think it's going to, what we're targeting is really a Chalcobamba style. We see skarns outcropping here along the edge of the intrusions, and it looks very similar to what you see here at Chalcobamba. So that's about over 300 million tonne, around 0.55 copper with some silver type deposits. So that's the analogy we're using, and so far the geology looks very similar to what you see there, and it's coming together nicely. So that's in C3. Two fantastic projects there, both with the opportunity to put together a big discovery. And then the last one here is Andina Copper. Andina's new. We've packaged this together up over the past 3 years, led by Joe Van der Nelson, who's the CEO. Again, 3 years ago, we restructured this company. We cleaned a lot of the existing older projects out of it, changed the management team, changed the board, and it's still a bit of a work in progress. We went down to Argentina just opening up as a new frontier. And then we spent a long time, two years or more than 2 years, looking for a company-making project. We found this project inside, this is called Piuquenes. I should just go back here and show you where it is. So it's down here in Argentina. It's right near some big deposits. So Glencore's got El Pichon. It's about 1.5 billion tonnes of 0.55 copper, about 30 k's to the south. McEwen Copper's a bit to the north. And then across the border, you got Antofagasta's big operation, Los Pelambres. So you're in world-class terrain there. Sorry, I skipped over this slide. There's 2 projects that sit inside Andina Copper. There's Piuquenes in Argentina and Cobrasco in Colombia. Both of those have got major discoveries already. And you can see Piuquenes drill holes like 800 metres at 0.4 copper, 0.5 gold, includes 500 metres at 0.5 copper, 0.7 gold. And then 2 holes into Piuquenes East and already got some nice intersections there too. And then Cobrasco's got some massive intersections down there. And I'll touch on both of those just quickly as we run in. So Piuquenes, sorry, I jumped forward a bit. Again, going to the thematic, this is immediately to the south of us here in the grey. That's held by a company called Aldebaran Resources. Aldebaran's got 2.4 billion tonnes of 0.42 copper sitting here right on the boundary of this property. This property was in private hands for 30 years. It's had very little or no work done. Inmet drilled there in the 70s, and they drilled 1 hole, which was this hole here. They drilled 6 holes, and 2 holes went into porphyry. These are the 2 holes that I've seen in the data: 413 metres of 0.47 copper and 0.52 gold, and 158 at 0.38 from 3 metres. So immediately I said to Joe, this is a project we've got to get. Joe's fluent in Spanish language, spent a lot of his time living in Colombia and South America. I said, you got to go down to Argentina, you got to meet these people, and you got to drink as much Malbec and eat as much steak as it takes to get hold of this project. And to Joe's credit, he went down there, he spent 3 months getting to, just building a relationship with a vendor who's been known to be a difficult vendor to get a deal done, and got a deal done on this property. So full credit to Joe for securing it. It's had very little work. Just a little story so that I think people find this interesting, especially the technical people on the call. After Inmet, there was only 1 other hole ever drilled. Anglo American farmed into this property. They went up there. They drilled, this was about 12 years ago. They drilled 1 hole, and that hole went down to 800 and I think about 900 odd metres. Subsequently, they had the core sitting on the drill pad. The snow came early here, about 3,800 metres. The snow came early. They all came down off the hill, said, we'll come back and get the core. The geologist logged the core. He estimated the grade pretty well. And then Anglo American closed their Argentinian office down during the off-season. The core was never cut. It was still sitting on the drill pad. The vendor of this project had the drill core. We cut that drill core and assayed that drill core, and it had 801 metres of 0.4 copper, 0.51 gold. And that's a hole that was drilled by a major and left there uncut. These are the opportunities that are created in these areas. So our target here is to find 300-400 million tonnes. We think we've got probably 150 million tonnes in Piuquenes Central already. We've only got 2 holes in the east. We're doing geophysics over the property now, and we're going to be drilling that this season. We'll get another 5,000-6,000 metres into it, and we think we'll put together some decent-sized economic resources here. And then Andina has just taken over another company called Rugby Resources predominantly for this project in Cobrasco. down in Colombia. If I just zip back up here for a sec. So we're on the extension of the Andean copper belt. 70% of the world's copper comes out of this belt. We're up here in Colombia. This is jungle covered part of the Andean copper belt. So Ecuador, northern part of Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, you move into jungle covered terrain, which is very underexplored relative to other parts of the Andean belt. And this is really the new frontier for, big discoveries that hasn't had much work done. So, and, if you listen to, some of the major companies, I think Mike Christie from First Quantum Exploration Manager was on another podcast a while ago and talking, and this is one of his picks for where the next big generation of discoveries is coming from. So this is, as said down there, it's called Cobrasco North. On the right-hand side, you'll see, on the right-hand side, you'll see what the terrain looks like. On the left-hand side, this is a map. This is copper in streams. And if you look at the scale bar down the bottom right, there's 1 kilometre. And so you'll see the copper again, this massive footprint in a new frontier. You got 12, maybe 15 kilometres of plus 500 ppm copper in streams. So this is a monster area. There's going to be something big in here. So Andina holds Cobrasco North and Cobrasco South, and in the middle is Cometa, and Cometa's held by a private company called Minera Copper, and Rio Tinto is found in earning 75% in Cometa from Minera Copper. So, big boys are in here, and Minera Copper's shareholders include big companies like Glencore, Teck, First Quantum. So most of the big companies are around here. Rugby Resources went in here. They've drilled 3 holes. You can see the 3 holes here, 800 metres of essentially about 0.5 copper, 750 at better than 0.5. And then the last hole drilled 145 metres, 0.7 copper. And the last 2.6 metres of that hole, it stopped at 300 metres. And I won't go into the details of why it stopped today, but the last 2.6 metres ran 2.7% copper. So you can get high grade in these systems. It's a giant system here. Why are most of the majors around this? Because this is going to be it'll probably evolve to be something like, the Collahuasi district. It's copper moly. There's no gold in this system, but there's likely to be multi-billions of tonnes sitting here. So all the majors around, and Andina, small junior company, we hold the north and the southern part of that project. So let's just move on. So that's really a bit of a snapshot of the things that I have been involved with and the things I've been involved with. I'm not going to spend much time on this. I'm just going to say that you got to know we have a very definitive strategy and business plan around the way we go about exploration. We know that business it's a venture capital business. It's based on probabilities and probabilities management. And, I think every explorationist should know the business that they're in. I read more books about, like the ones down here, thinking in bets and thinking fast and slow and chance and understanding how you manage the probabilities to get yourself from 1,000 to 1 to 10 to 1. And I think, John, I think you alluded to a Rick Rule presentation. I think I might have been listening to that on the web last night, the same one. And he said, nobody can play the odds in the game. You've got to select 10 things to do. And back them heavily. And, that's sort of the way that we think about things. And we're very clinical about the way we manage our programs. Big things, test the low-hanging fruit, cut them early, and continue to strengthen the portfolio, which you can see, we've been doing on the way through here. So just in summary, really, value creation, the thematic through here has been value creation from exploration in underexplored frontiers, which is where I've spent my career. And by fishing in the right ponds with the right strategy, the right people, even little guys can land big fish, as you can see there. Just a few takeaways. Look, I'm going to just start at the bottom there, this looking forward, taking advantage of the opportunities. This is a slide Richard Shoddy, and quite a few people from Minex Consulting, quite a few people on the call will probably know of Richard or No, Richard. And I just grabbed this out of one of his old presentations because I thought it was very pertinent to the business that we're in. And this was probably, Richard maybe put this together 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I'm not sure, but looking forward to take advantages. This was in the down part of the cycle. The current climate creates great opportunities for acquisitions and consolidation. History shows great companies are born in adversity. Need to focus on what's important. Success comes with a strong vision to find quality assets. Now's the right time to hire the gun geologists, look for greenfields, look in the next greenfields for the next giant deposit, buy the next Sepon, or take a key land position in a neglected commodity country. So, Richard, I think you can see from what I've said today that I've followed your advice, and exactly we've done that, and we're doing that both in the down part of the cycle and in these sort of new frontiers as we've come out of the cycle. So look, a few key takeaways here. You've got to have a very clear, disciplined, well-communicated strategy. It is a long game. You've got to focus on delivering that strategy and don't be distracted from it. Investors want to see you stick to, do what you say you're going to do and do it well. There is no substitute for quality. So you've got to find great assets, and you've got to have great assets attract with the right strategy. Great assets attract the right people, and it's really that quality that gets you through the difficult times and creates value for your shareholders. Risk capital is just that. Shareholders expect you. They know what game they're in. They expect you to progress, work things, test your projects. If they don't shape up, move on, as long as you're very clear on that. Play to your strengths, know your capabilities. Don't die in the vine from inactivity. The NexGen Energy one, I think, clearly shows, and then the Piuquenes down in Argentina. Don't be afraid to deal. Sometimes you've got to give to what you've got to get. And as I said to Joe when we picked up Piuquenes, good projects don't come cheaply. Good, great projects don't come cheaply. So just get the project, make sure you get a reasonable commercial deal, and we can always reshape that. As long as you push the cost to the back end, we've got 4 years to test what's really there, and then we can decide whether we want to continue or not. Loyal shareholders and supporters, they'll get you through the cycle. You've got to build a base and treat them well, communicate extremely well, and you've got to deliver on your promises with, build credibility with all your stakeholders. And, there's nothing truer than that. I think it was Charlie Munger was the one who said trust. Trust is one of the greatest drivers of economic development that there is, and trust. People are trusting you with their money. They know what they're doing, and they want you to actually do with their money what you said you're going to do with the money. So just to finish off, there's just one or two takeaways out of this. These are value creators. These are just some pretty recent examples, actually. So I'll just snapshot these. These are ones I just, off the top of my head, I grabbed. These are companies. These are TSX listed companies predominantly. So ATEX Collective. ATEX Argentina, Collective Colombia, Filo Argentina up in the hot Andes, NGEX Argentina, NexGen Energy we talked about, and Vizsla Copper and Silvers down in Sinaloa in Mexico. So again, these are not easy places. These are new frontier areas, and you can see the value creation that's come from these companies making discoveries in these new frontier areas. People were probably a bit iffy when they first went in there, but through focused strategies and good exploration, they've made big discoveries, and the market's rewarded them for that. And I think the other thing just to take away is, and I think Rick Rule maybe said this as well in that podcast or that presentation, John, he said, when I had an analyst go back and review all my 10 baggers, every one of them took between 5 and 7 years to come to fruition. So if you look on the bottom line here, all of these things have taken between 5 years and longer to come to fruition. So I think, patience is a competitive strength and advantage when you're investing in these types of projects and these types of investments. So that's it. Thanks, John.
Tony, that's absolutely magnificent. Some brilliant lessons there, both for explorationists and for investors, I think. So I know we've run a little bit over time, but I certainly didn't want to pull you up because it was brilliant stuff. So thank you very much. People may want, I think we can keep going. People may want to hang around. We've got a few questions which we'll try and get to. Firstly, in no particular order, from Alberto, great presentation. Tony, what's the most common mistake? And you've got 30 seconds to answer these, Tony. What's the most common mistake junior explorers make in copper systems?
Not recognising the scale of what they're working in early enough. Spending too much time on small things.
Yeah. Okay. Is Piuquenes a standalone project, or will you need to work with Aldebaran? I guess that's not something you might want to comment around it, but it's probably not something you can talk to directly.
No, I think, look, ultimately it's a district. They got multi-tons there. They've actually got a high-grade gold-rich porphyry system up to the north, not far across from Piuquenes Central. I think ultimately it all comes together. The strategy of Andina is to be in areas where there's a high probability of M&A happening. Aldebaran's got South 32 and Sabanya as shareholders in the company, and there's been a lot of interest from majors in what we're doing there. So ultimately, I think it all comes together into one package.
Okay. Here's another one. Why are Aussie companies taking so long to go to Latin America, being well across risk management in Africa and Southeast Asia? Is the perceived physical distance an issue?
Yeah, I've been asked this question multiple times, and I think from the reaction I've had to the things that I'm involved in South America, I think answer that question. So I think the predominant reason is that the types of deposits in South America that I'm talking about here, the things that generate 70% of the world's copper, they're giant porphyry systems, right? You need deep pockets. They take a lot of drilling. These are expensive areas, frontier areas to access, to drill, to build things, huge capex to develop. So I think the main impediment has been the perception that small companies, these projects are too big for small companies. But on the TSX, they've sort of got a long history, which is quite different to the way that ASX think about it. ASX think about junior companies taking projects through to be producers. On the TSX, they think about junior companies finding things to on-sell to majors. So there's a different cultural aspect here. So the TSX is still the same time zone as well, so it's easier. But I think that cultural difference is a big one. And the thought process for ASX investors is these things are too big, too long gestation, and take too much capital, too much money for them to attract investors. So I think that's been the primary impediment to this point in time. I think I've seen a wholesale change in people's thinking with copper price moving and the transaction of BHP taking over Filo. I think people's mindset's changing a bit around that.
Great insight. I think this next one is probably related to that answer you just gave, but what is a healthy cash position for a junior mining company undertaking a drill campaign while analysing explorers sub 75 million Aussie market cap? How important is the relationship between market cap and cash balance? Okay. You can never have too much cash, I suppose.
Yeah, you never have too much cash, but I'd say a healthy number is to have at least 10%, a minimum 10% of your market cap in cash, I think is a good starting point. Obviously, what's a healthy cash position if you're drilling? The important answer to that is that whatever you tell shareholders you're going to do with the money you've got, then you make sure that you've got enough money to get to that milestone or decision point. Because the worst thing that can happen is you run out of money halfway getting through a milestone or a decision point that you've told people that that's where you're going to get to. So I think the most critical thing is to think about it backwards and say, how much cash do I need to get to a decision point, either to go ahead or to cut our losses and get out of this thing. So you need to have the money to, I think, to get to that decision point and clearly articulate that to shareholders in the market.
Yes. Okay. Probably the last question. I'm not sure which project this relates to, but what makes this system an IOCG prospect rather than another deposit type? I'm not sure if we've got one of those. But
that'll be Mantau.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
comparable is this target to Prominent Hill in terms of host rock alteration and structural setting?
Yeah, look, I think the simple answer to that is a bit early to say. And you'll notice in the Andina presentation, I think we say IOCG, a range of different deposit styles. Why IOCG is because there's some analogous stuff to IOCGs in that part of the world, number one. And then when you look at the rocks that are at Mantau, you got magnetite, a lot of magnetite and specular hematite, which you get in the IOCG systems. So it's as simple as that, very early stage. In the coastal belt, you do have IOCG analogous deposits in that terrain. And we've just in the rocks that we've got today, we're seeing a lot of specular hematite, magnetite, and a similar alteration to what you get in the IOCG system. So I think the way to think about Mantau, don't think about it as Prominent Hill, think about it more as go and have a look at what Marimarca Copper's found at their deposit, new discovery next door called Pampa Medina. And I think that's probably more going to be the model that Mantau fits than a Prominent Hill.
Okay, thank you. I might just get to the poll to throw the poll up. The last two questions are very quick to answer. First one I think is for me. Does LRT Lowell own any Andina Copper shares? Well, the short answer is yes, and pretty pumped about what the potential is at Andina. And the last one, Tony, definitely have your 5 cents worth here. Do you or Tony have any thoughts on the GABA test? And does this go 5 days? So I don't think it goes 5 days, but Tony, what do you reckon?
Probabilities say no, it doesn't go 5 days. I'm a probabilities guy.
Yeah. Look, I think we better wrap it up there. We've well gone past the hour, but look, that was absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed it. Some really great insights from someone who has thought very deeply about the exploration process and applied his learnings to a huge amount of success, and certainly hoping that and expecting that you will have plenty more over the coming years. So Tony, thank you so much for preparing that beautiful presentation and taking the time to present it today.
No worries, John. Yeah, it was great to share it with people. Actually forced me to get myself organised and get a few of these things in one place, so it was good.